Today's date is April 18th, 2018. 80 years ago to the day, Action Comics #1 appeared on newsstands. It's a hugely significant event because that was the first appearance of Superman, the birth of the modern superhero, and the beginning of an industry which has affected almost every American, many people around the world, and is directly responsible for all of the superhero movies that people have been enjoying. Action Comics #1 has now sold for over $3 million at auction in excellent condition. And virtually everybody around the world knows who Superman is. Two boys from Cleveland, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, conceived the character and developed him for 5 years and submitted the idea of the strip to everyone they could imagine, specifically newspapers, because they envisioned it as a newspaper strip, as superhero comic books did not exist at the time. One of the people that they submitted it to remembered it when Donnan and Leibowitz of National Publications needed material to fill their new book, Action Comics. They told Siegel and Shuster to prepare 13 pages and to do it quickly. So Siegel and Shuster took their strips and cut them up and repositioned them and came up with material. The cover that we've been looking at is from a 50-year anniversary reprint from 1988. It's a little different than the original. This is a print of the original. I don't have the $3 million right now to buy a copy of the original, so you'll have to settle for reproductions. But the original price was 10 cents, and it had in the corner this guy running away. He's actually someone from the 13 pages of material that they created. His name was Butch Madsen, and he was a tough guy that had given Clark Kent some grief in a nightclub. The actual artwork for the cover was done by a national staffer, not by Joe Shuster, even though he's often credited. But this is the panel that was inspiration for the cover, and it is by Joe Shuster. When you turn the page in Action Comics #1, there's a one-page origin of Superman, and it's amazing to me how much of the foundation for the character is there. I had the opportunity to meet Joe Shuster when I was in 4th grade, and this was the only piece of art I had by him, a reprint of that one page from Action Comics #1. So I had him sign it, and I've kept it ever since, and it now resides in a frame. So on that page in the first panel, you see the rocket ship leaving an unnamed planet. I'm not sure when they came up with the name Krypton, but I do know when they reprinted the story, the first story in Superman #1, they left out this page, but they replaced it with a 2-page version. And in that 2-page version, it was called Krypton then. They showed Superboy with strength, or Super Baby, Clark Kent leaping over buildings in a single bound, demonstrating amazing strength, running faster than an express train, and in his full costume glory. All of these, I think, were cut up and repurposed leftover newspaper strips. And here we see a scientific explanation of Clark Kent's amazing strength. The name Clark Kent is interesting. Jerry Siegel was a huge fan of pulp literature, including Doc Savage and The Shadow. Doc Savage's first name was Clark Savage, and he had a Fortress of Solitude in the Arctic, so he was definitely an influence on Superman. And The Shadow went by the alias of Kent Allard and had a lady friend named Margot Lane. So the names Kent and Lane were a huge influence on Siegel and are now more well known for being associated with Clark Kent and Lois Lane. So here it says that Superman has the comparative strength of an ant for scale and the leaping ability of a grasshopper. These exact same things were used in a 1930 novel, Gladiator, by Philip Wiley, and that also is believed to have been a huge influence on Jerry Siegel. After that, let me just turn to my copy of the comic. It starts out a tireless figure races through the night. Seconds count. Delay means forfeit of an innocent life. So it starts out in the middle of a story with Superman, our hero, carrying a bound and gagged woman. That doesn't seem very heroic, and it surprises me that with a start like that, Superman became so popular so quickly, but he did. I have a suspicion that they had more introductory material, and in fact, when this story was reprinted in Superman #1, they added some material to the front of it so it actually makes more sense and provides context for what's happening. It didn't hurt sales, though, and what happened here is Superman is taking a woman. He leaves her outside of the governor's house, and it's night, and so the governor's servants don't really want to let him in, but he forces his way, as you can see. And there's a steel door, and he's goaded into breaking through that, so of course he does. And he gives the governor a confession by the real killer, and an innocent man is freed from electrocution, or maybe it's the gas chamber. Anyway, he's freed from execution. And that's kind of the end of the first story, and then it goes on, and he meets with the editor of the Daily Planet, and is asked if he's heard of Superman, and says very truthfully that if he can't find out about Superman, no one can. He also receives a tip about a wife beater, and shows the wife beater what tough really is. You're not fighting a woman now. Superman in the early days was more of a bully than he is now. He's not the nice guy. Clark Kent, however, was wimpier than he's currently portrayed. He asks Lois out, and she says she'll give him a break. But here, he says, "Why do you always avoid me at the office?" And she says, "Please, Clark. I've been scribbling sob stories all day long. Don't ask me to dish out another." I used to wonder why it was the writers of Superman, Jerry Siegel specifically, decided to make Clark Kent such a wimp. And it's only recently that I've realized it's because Jerry Siegel, who I think was overweight, he wore glasses, worst of all, he was Jewish, he was bullied a lot. And so by making Clark Kent, portraying him as the kind of person who would be bullied, it was his heroic fantasy for himself. So Clark Kent, as he was originally portrayed, is Jerry Siegel. And that's why, but Superman is also Jerry Siegel. Superman embodied all of the qualities that Jerry Siegel wished that he had. So, in 1939, Superman was such a hit that they gave him his own title, and what they did was they reprinted the stories from Action Comics. So they did add a few pages onto this. They showed Superman getting a job at the Daily Planet. You can tell that the artwork was done after these pages were. There are a couple of telltale things. All of these hatching marks on Superman to show darkness on his figure are gone in the artwork that's later done. And also you can see, it's hard to see here, but you can just kind of make out there was a more decorative boot design that was done in the original, for the original newspaper strips, and that was lost pretty quickly. So the publishers knew that Action Comics was a great seller, but they didn't know why. So Action Comics #2 was produced, and they didn't bother putting Superman on the cover, nor did they put him on the cover in issue 3 4, 5. It went 5 issues without returning Superman to the cover, and it was only when they found out that people were asking for the magazine that Superman was in that they began putting Superman on the cover regularly, and it wasn't long until Superman was on the cover of every issue of Action Comics. In the very last panel of the 13 pages, it says, "And so begins the startling adventures of the most sensational strip character of all time, Superman, only in Action Comics." And they actually kept that in there when they reprinted in Superman #1, so that's kind of funny because at that point he was available in Action and Superman, and I don't know exactly when the radio show started, but it was, if it hadn't started by the time Superman #1 came out, it started soon thereafter. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.